one of the themes that sort of framed this afternoon, starting with Frédéric's talk, has been this notion of, or the question, really, of circularity. And what does it mean, or its many meanings? And I have, as John can tell you, long wanted to introduce this as a topic. This is our first, and I say first, but hopefully I'll be standing here someday and I'll tell you it's our 20th. Panel to focus on the notion of circularity, the circular economy, and recycled precious materials. And so I want to tell you who is on the panel, and one of the things I want to beg your indulgence with is the following. When you are trying to have this many people come together, there are pieces that move until checkmate has been declared. So you will see on our website an updated agenda. Brochure will be updated subsequently, and of course this will be archived. But for example, great, that is right. You're just always trying to keep up with the changes. So on this panel, to my immediate right is Sekila Mirza, who is president of Responsible Gold, which is, I'll just give you a little thumbnail, it's a technology-led company advancing gold traceability and digitalization across the precious metals industry. And prior to joining Responsible Gold, which is where I met her, Sekila spent over a decade at the London Bullion Market Association, or LBMA. I'm going to stop there. Rebecca Boyajian, who is Director of Market Development at GIA, and she has several versions of the title, so that is one approved version. And Rebecca, you had the pleasure of meeting yesterday when she deftly moderated the Diamond panel. We have, Michael McTeague, who is the president of McTeague, New York, 1895, and he is involved, if you will, with seeing the magnificence of the past and putting it forward to today, and I'll just leave that evocation there. And John Mulligan, who is the head of, the strategic sustainability strategy at the World Gold Council and the president of the Sustainability Commission at CIBJO, Frédéric Denard, from whom you heard just recently, and Kat Weymouth, Director of Diamond and Jewelry Services at SCS. And it's an absolutely splendid panel, and I leave you in their capable hands and those of Sekila.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. Is this too close? Is this okay? Yeah, great. Well, firstly, Lisa, to echo a lot of people in the room, thank you so much for what a fantastic 2 days it's been. Hopefully I can do you justice by being the penultimate panel. I know John's got the final panel. But just a little, if I can, criticism. A small criticism. England is playing at 3 o'clock, and you put some Brits on the panel when England is playing.
Oh God, we could have
But it is a request.
We'll have a late lunch, break for soccer.
But it is a request for the room. If England score, some shout out, please. Thank you. Any Argentinian supporters here? Oh.
My daughter in the corner over there.
Well, may the best team win. Moving on. Well, first of all, I'm just going to say thank you to Frédéric for making my job so much easier. I can save you all from a long context, because Frédéric set the context for me earlier on, which helps me to move on to the questions more directly, or maybe it's a bit of a cop-out so I don't have to do a lot of the hard work and leave my panelists to do most of it. I will say, I'm hoping by the end of this panel, you all leave with some clarity on what is circularity. I mean, that's a mouthful. But also understanding, is circularity part of the sustainability agenda, or can we extract commercial value from circularity? And finally, how does this affect the jewelry sector? And what is it that the jewelry sector needs to be thinking about when it comes to making decisions as part of their supply chains and just general business decisions? Over the years, we have seen a huge amount of interest in responsible sourcing. We've seen stronger demand around transparency over supply chains, and there's been a strong push for accountability. But equally, there's been an increase in demand for precious metals, particularly gold, and also rise in prices, which has made the environment quite complex as we all try to navigate various issues when it comes to supply chains. Some we've heard about, and some we're going to discuss today. So with that, I'm going to start with my first question, and my first question is a bit of a fire round, and what that means, I want everybody to just spend 2 minutes, nothing more, on defining what is circularity according to them. I'm going to start with Frederick because you've already set one definition, and then I'm going to move down the panel. But again, just 2 minutes because I want to explore some of the other questions.
Thank you, Sakila.
Yeah.
But I've talked about it a little bit, but circularity in the luxury world is one word that corresponds to many different facets. There is a circularity around the material, the reuse of the materials, so recycled gold, recycled precious stones, and that's only talking about the recycling of the materials. But there is also the product circularity, which means the transformation of the product, the repair, the restoration, the tiara that becomes a bracelet, and then the heritage circularity as well, which is fundamental in the creation of trust and confidence and values for the luxury industry. So there are at least those three facets, but I could also say about value circularity, meaning circularity. So only one word, but many facets.
Right. Michael?
Good afternoon, everybody. For us, it's very close to the way we make a living. We function as a reabsorption mechanism for jewelry towards the end of its current life cycle. And our first intention is to reuse that jewelry in its current state. And often that involves restoration, or we just delivered a product today that we've owned for almost 2 years that we've been restoring, an old Cartier mystery clock, a Model A. Very, very beautiful thing, one of the nicest things we've ever owned. It can take 2 hours to own or 2 years to repair. And all of our business, and I'm here with the 5th generation of the family, my daughter, Emma, and we are absorbing jewelry back and reusing it. That's our
So we've got value
existence.
Creation, we've got reuse. Rebecca, no pressure, John, you're going to have to come up with something different.
Yeah, it's nice having all the unique perspectives on the panel. Good afternoon, everyone. You know, circularity to me, and the definition that I can think of today and what applies to my most recent background before joining GIA and now with the GIA, is very much consumer focused. I am a huge purveyor and buyer in the secondary market and have been since my youth. So I'm a consumer myself, and I have previously worked for a company within the circular market, the secondary market, and with GIA, our focus is really about consumer protection. At the end of the day, everything that we do, we run it through our mission as, does this protect the consumer? And so from the circularity standpoint, this is a vital and crucial part of the industry for us to be a part of, that we're delving into more, and I'm excited to hopefully tell you guys a little bit about. So it's really about, circularity to me is about empowering the consumer, making sure they know what they are buying, what's available to them, and that they are getting the correct information and valuation for their pieces.
Oh, great. So empowerment and transparency. So Kat, over to you.
Hi, everyone. I come with a little bit of a different lens because I'm coming from the auditing and certification background. That's what SCS Global Services does. And so for us, circularity, we are thinking of that closed loop, right? Like how are we either reusing that or recycling that item? And it could be a component, it could be in total piece, it could be whatever that item is throughout the life cycle, having multiple life cycles. But then we're also looking for, we're adding on that credibility. How is that verified? How is that traced through the cycle to be able to ensure that that piece was actually circular?
Great, so we heard traceability, and actually it's the first time we heard the word recycled on this panel. I actually thought it was going to be one of the first terms we heard, but John, did you want to add to that?
So I think circularity, and you already kind of heard it, so I'm going to basically, it's easy because I can just repeat what everybody else has said.
Or you can summarize it for me.
I'll do that later. Circularity, it's all of the above, because it really depends on the material and the item and the life cycle. So if you're basically reabsorbing, reusing, repurposing, you've taken an item, and that item to some extent still retains some of its quality. So it's repurposed, but you're not recycling. Recycling is a transformative activity which takes the material. So you all know what recycled plastic is. You all know what recycled paper is. Only certain materials can be recycled in that sense. So we have something quite specific, which is recycling, and then we have something which is more general, which is the circularity, reuse, repurpose, repair, restore, etc.
Great summary, thank you, Joe. Let me just stay with you then. So given the discussion we've just had, how important do you think sourcing is to the circularity agenda?
So it's key to some extent, and it really depends on the material you're talking about. And so the challenge of recycling is how much of the sense of origin or source is important to that material once it's recycled.
I mean, I know you've said a few times you've got a few hats. So if I was to focus on one of your other hats, the World Gold Council hat, and given some of the members of the World Gold Council are at the mining companies, from your perspective, how does the circularity agenda sit with mined gold? So,
well, a really good test case for this is single mine origin or single source origin gold. Because the person buying it, the consumer, is choosing to buy gold where they can name the mine. So they're usually buying an end product, the source, but the material is segmented during the refining process. I'm going to come to that in the next session. Is segmented, and therefore you can say all of that gold or all of the gold in that jewelry piece originally comes from one source. The challenge there is if that piece ever comes back as scrap for recycling, for re-refining, to be transformed into something else, then that source can, well, the source typically goes, is absorbed into the new life cycle. The only way you could retain it is to keep segmenting. So I take my SMO ring back and I say, okay, I'm selling it, but this refiner keeps and segments the SMO source. Otherwise, the concept of source is inevitably lost. And I like to always say, you mentioned mining, all gold is obviously mined, all was. Eventually, a large portion of gold will be recycled. That means that the sense of source from the pointing to the original mine will likely get lost in the process. It's very difficult. And we talked about yesterday some of the technologies we are looking at to try and see whether we can actually keep an identity of the source after the melt. But it is very, very challenging. One more thing about that issue of the source and the importance of the source is, yes, with SMO or SSO, you want to maintain that identity of the mine, but otherwise, what is the importance of the source? It's what are you trying to retain? What is the value of that identity of the source? And I think that's the question we need to ask.
Did anybody want to come in on that in terms of the sourcing? I mean, I was going to ask Kat, because obviously there's a lot of product claims out there.
I was just going to say, it comes back to the claim that you're going to attempt to make, and that's when the source becomes important. It's what is the claim being attached to the consumer, in that product. So if the claim is SMO gold, then you have to be able to prove that. If the claim is fair mind or fair trade or whatever that is, even if it's a claim of recycled, you need to be able to prove that that process has been achieved to make that proper claim to the consumer and for it to be clear and transparent.
So when you, I guess from your organization, are you going in and actually verifying or certifying? And what is the difference between the two processes? Yeah.
So certification it's a good question because a lot of people I don't think understand the answer between what is verification and what is certification. Certification is conformance to a specific standard. ISO certification, RJC certification, those are certifications to a specific standard and a specific set of criteria. Verification could be that we have outlined a process, so we have outlined steps, and someone is now coming and verifying that those are being followed. That doesn't have to be a set standard. And so SES does have like a recycled content certification. And in those processes, we are going in, and as John mentioned, the segmentation you want to see based on what the claim is going to be said. If the claim is X, you have to be able to prove that you segment and can document and how you track and trace all of the material to make that claim.
I mean, nice segue into a question for Rebecca then. I mean, you mentioned earlier on in terms of the consumer and what they want, and I know you said the GIA is doing a lot of work. So maybe you want to expand on that now a little bit in terms of what it is the GIA is doing and what trends are you seeing from a consumer perspective on circularity?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I was having a conversation at my table earlier today. And really what we're focusing on, what we realized is that with this great wealth transfer that's about to happen from the baby boomer generation to the next generations after, there is going to be a lot more jewelry flooding the secondary market. And these individuals, consumers, need a place to go to and to figure out what they have, what they own. You know, you could speak to the people that say that they have like a very large, you know, what looks like an aquamarine. It turns out to be something smaller and a blue topaz. But they need to know that, you know, and the consumer, we can't necessarily educate everyone, but we are here for the consumer so that they know what their pieces are. So in order to satisfy part of this need, the GIA has launched jewelry services, and it's really an umbrella for two main services. The first is the jewelry report. So much like a diamond grading report, you can submit a piece of jewelry to the GIA with little information about it. We will assess the piece completely and create a report for it. And as a secondary to that, we also have jewelry verification service, which is where we verify, actually. And there's a made claim, so this is more for the trade, serving the trade. But there's a made claim on the piece, and for our secondary market piece, that could also include a brand, if it's a Cartier Love bracelet, or Van Cleef & Arpels motif, Alhambra motif bracelet. So we will verify the made claim about the pieces. So this, in turn, helps the trade and gives the trade verification, and then when they sell it to the consumer has that backed by GIA, that verified by GIA. So these are the two certain like mainline services that we've launched, which are very different which is just very different for GIA, but we're seeing that it's a real need based on the way that consumer habits and just how things are, this great wealth transfer is going to come about. So.
I'll come back to you on the great wealth transfer in a moment, but just continuing on the theme in terms of how trends are changing. Frederick, in terms of can circularity become a source of desirability rather than sustainability, in your opinion?
Yes, indeed, it does big time. It does the circularity reinforces the desirability. It reinforces the customer engagement, trust, as long as you can prove and document effectively where your materials and your stones are coming from. It brings a selective scarcity, a rarity, products with a soul. And ultimately, it creates desirability and innovation and creativity, because we come back to the basic roots of how high jewelry makers, the first job of a jewelry maker is to work around the stone. So when you have the material being at the center, You have the workmanship and the artisans and the designer working to create to design around the stones, and this is also stimulating innovation. So yes, indeed, it does create a lot of desirability.
Great, thank you. Mike, if I may, as we are hearing that there's genuine compelling reasons why circularity is important and why it's growing, of course, feel free to add any other reasons that you might not have heard in terms of how we can get more buy-in to circularity. But the question I want to focus on, what are the challenges in getting that buy-in to circularity?
I think that Rebecca is onto something with the GIA's mission. Excuse me. I think Rebecca's, the GIA, the Gemological Institute of America, will help dramatically give customers confidence. You mentioned 2 items. They're the most knocked off items in the history of jewelry. Yeah. The Cartier Love Bracelet and the Alhambra necklace. And even just to the trade, we often will pass on buying something that doesn't come with the original bill of sale because they're made so often. And that takes from the consumer confidence, the ability to buy something and have faith is going to be a stumbling block. And so that will be a big asset, I believe. Yeah.
So one of the themes that keeps coming up in this conversation as part of circularity is the concept of traceability. And as you just said, having confidence in the actual product, knowing where it's coming from. But the reality is that us convincing ourselves that that's what the consumer wants? Is the consumer coming into the stores and they sort of look at 2 rings, one is mined gold, one is recycled gold. Are they asking the question, which ring is sourced from where? And anybody can take this, but I'll start with Mike.
I would say there's many different types of consumers, but yes, I do think so. And I think the market teaches us as a trade where to focus, because if the retailers who are in the trenches selling these items are getting no traction, they're going to find the place where the client needs to be served. And I think that will work itself out. It's my gut.
Frederick, did you want to add anything?
I think for first we made that as a fundamental element for the revival of those brands. Ruvna is entirely circular, and we prove it with a digital passport. So every single item comes with a digital passport. We work on the blockchain to document that the stones has this certificate is coming from an ancient piece of jewelry that has been dismantled. The diamonds have been part of a piece of jewelry that can prove that the diamonds are 8, 10 years old. So we document them, and that's part of what is said. I mean, the clients, they need trust and confidence, and for that, we need to document.
Right.
So, Skila, I'll jump in. To go back to your question, this dichotomy or this choice, or that there's mined gold and there's recycled gold, as I kept saying, it's all mined at one point. So the question is, why is the consumer asking this question? Now, the question often, when it's the recycled gold, is supposed to be, or is actually, about what's called a product footprint. It's the idea that this product potentially has a footprint, whether it be a carbon footprint or another impact footprint, which is different from the same product from a different source. Now, there's a big question whether that is actually meaningful and impactful, because the question I generally ask when people make that distinction is, why are you asking for that distinction? If you're interested in the carbon footprint, are you interested in it because buying that makes you feel that you've not inherited carbon? The issue of, if you're interested in actual climate impacts, then the climate impacts, it may be actually more meaningful to buy a product directly from a source where you know there's a decarbonisation action, a plan. So if you went from SMO, where the mine is decarbonising, you know there's quite a significant impact. It sounds a little complicated, or it sounds like I'm fudging a little, but I do think there's a somewhat confusion between this dichotomy about what is the motivation. So if a consumer says to a retailer, where does it come from? Because I want to be associated with a certain impact, I think you have to ask what is the impact rather than just assume they know that there is a significant difference. In the end, frankly, you're buying an inert material, and that inert material isn't going to change the world in any possible way. You're asking the question about the value chain, about basically, okay, well, can I know more, and can those questions be passed from the retailer to the distributor to the fabricator up to the mine? Those questions become meaningful, but I think we need to be clear on the purpose of the question.
Does that resonate with the other panelists, Rebecca? Or?
Yeah, I think, it's a large question, but when we say the client, they are not one client, you were saying different clients. First of all, it depends on the country. There are countries that couldn't care less, some countries that do care a lot. So we never talk about that, but the world is large, and so yes, that's something I wanted to add. But effectively, it's true that it just, injury is the art of being unique. You need to have a spectrum, you have a style, you belong to a moment of glory, you have a style, and you have your territory. So oftentimes a brand decides to define your own territory. A brand might say, I'm on recycled gold, the other one is recycled whatever. The other one will be, I want to be B Corp. The other one, he wants to be an entreprise à mission in France, RGC, everybody. So, but it's the territory you define. But I think it is true that ultimately they are. What I feel very positive is that this is the new generations. I have quite a few children. I have 7 children, so and this is the new generation that is pushing. And my generation, we couldn't care less for the planet, and this is why we are here today talking about it. Because we didn't. And the new generations, they do care. So independently, they do care, and they ask. And it's part of not only the end clients, but the way you recruit your people. The first thing they interview you don't interview young people, they interview you, said, what do you do for the planet? What should I join your company? It's incredible. So it is true, it's part of your territory, you decide to frame and to belong to and to certify. But ultimately, I think this is making this whole process of the new generation, what I like about it is that it makes us progress because it pushes the boundaries. We have to have responsible mind. Everybody has to be responsible in the end.
So this is all well and good in terms of, we've heard, the certifications, we've heard about traceability, due diligence, but it all comes at a cost. Somebody has to pay for it. So how are your organizations looking about the commercial? We've heard the term, or we've heard the issue around funding consistently throughout the last 2 days. So ultimately, there's a price for a lot of the additional work that is being carried out. Is that being passed on to the consumer? Are the organizations absorbing it? And maybe I'm becoming a bit contentious, so answer whatever you feel comfortable with. Because we've got to, again, address the realities of where does the cost sit for a lot of this work?
My first response or thought is that tech will help keep the costs down there. Traceability is a function of record keeping, and record keeping is greatly assisted by technology more and more every day.
Right.
Maybe a little optimistic, but
I can say funding, yes. No, it's difficult to find the clients that put the hands in the pocket to buy more expensive a piece because it is sustainable. But it's a duty and a responsibility. And for me, humbly, I've launched the Lux Impact 6 years ago. I thought it would thrive from the get-go, and it took more cash, more time, more patience. And yes, but in the end, it's about funding. Finally, we found an investor last year that said, I just love the notion of time, and I want to be part of it because it makes sense. But yes, it's taking lots of cash to certify everything, to raise the questions, to put yourselves into constraints and barriers, to prevent you, to force you not to do certain things. Sometimes the decisions you're taking are as strong as the decisions you're taking not to do certain things, and that has a cost. So, yeah.
Rebecca, in terms of spinning it around then, you mentioned the great wealth transfer. Is that being seen as an opportunity for the sector, and especially to support the circularity agenda? How are your sort of members looking at this?
Yes, yes and yes. So we see the Great Wealth Transfer, as mentioned before, as an opportunity for the industry to really, lean into, you have the consumers that are coming in that do care about whether or not something is fair mind or not. But majority of consumers don't think that way. We think that way because we're knowledgeable and we're the voices and thought leaders in this room. But generally speaking, when we look at the consumer market, the demand for luxury goods has increased exponentially, and it's a younger and younger customer. And that younger customer, even if they don't know the difference between fair mind or not, gold or not, they do like the idea of buying things that are not brand new. And there's multiple reasons why they like that, or why I like that as well, right? But buying from a Matig is a different experience than going in, to the Cartier Maison, on here in New York. But the experience may be slightly different, but they're getting a different type of experience that they're actually looking for, that consumer wants. And they're also funneling into their own personal funds back into the market as part of this whole circularity and secondary market cycle. So it's something where they're not consuming new, right? A lot of us are consumers, but we're conscientious about not wanting to consume new. And actually, I was having a conversation with someone else at the conference yesterday who said that she buys all of her things on consignment and at thrift stores, and she looks fabulous every time I see her. So, so shout out to her. But these are important things to some consumers, even if they don't know all of the details that we know about. And I believe that, in going back to the question and bringing it back to that with all of these new pieces, and jewelry specifically, that are going to be flooded into consumers, that they're going to need a place to come to. They're going to need to come to us to know what it is they have, to know how it should be evaluated. What is it worth? Do they want to keep it? Is it worth it to rework it, to restyle it and redesign it? Is it worth it to sell it? So they're going to need those types of resources. So that's how we're really thinking about it. It's like, how can we assist the consumer specifically and protect them? And then who are the other collaborators within the industry of avenues that can help us? So.
John, I wanted to sort of pick your brains about the commercial value.
Let's go back to the...
Of course. Yeah.
So there's an implied assumption in what you said. There's a cost, and I want to know the cost of what exactly? So the cost of, we're talking about the cost of sustainability, which is not quite the issue of the circular economy. The circular economy, if it develops and is done correct, and this is also already true of lots of sectors and value chains, can reduce costs. It can be more efficient. It can allow us to then develop the systems to be more traceable, because we are circular, and therefore our supply chains are a little more well controlled. So I think the implication that there's always an implication that sustainability is a cost, and there are definite costs with due diligence, etc. But we should not forget that to go back to the theme of the conference, to be resilient is also to potentially save costs or create value. And I think it's important that we recognize that. Otherwise, we just constantly see ourselves burdened by more and more requirements. So the cost of due diligence, yes, but I think within the circular economy, there are some definite advantages. There is costs if you start to request certain things. And so I mentioned segmentation within, and we're talking specifically within precious metals. To refine, and it's the next panel, so I shouldn't really spoil it too much, but to refine something in a segmented fashion generally costs most gold refiners more money because it's inefficient, and refining is a very low margin business as it is. So I think the question there is, okay, what are you segmenting for? What is the purpose of that activity? Is it really needed? To go back to your comment on, I won't mention fair mind, I would mention responsible gold mining and responsible gold supply. The mainstream source of corporate listed transparent gold is already demonstrably responsible, and you are encouraged to go and ask for that source. You're encouraged to say, show me that you mine according to these standards. That's something that the World Gold Council has actually been very active on when talking to investors and consumers. Go ahead, ask the question. That should not necessarily come at an additional cost. And I think this is true of other supply chains. If we move away from precious metals, I was fortunate enough to sit on the panel with the head of sustainability from IKEA, and he was asked this question. You produce lots and lots of products. Should they have premiums? Should you have certification standards saying this is all sustainable and therefore we're adding a premium to it? And his position, and one I am sympathetic with, was no, we're never going to advance sustainability unless it's core to business provision and it's not additionally costed. Otherwise it becomes, sorry for the phrase, but a luxury. And so I think it's just, I heard the term costs and I just thought it was worth clarifying.
Yeah, and actually that was deliberate on my part. I wanted to put the word cost out because sometimes it's the elephant in the room, and it's then to understand, okay, so how is the term cost, or how are costs being addressed given the additional questions, given the additional work? But what I liked in your answer, and just to highlight it and emphasize it, is the word efficiency. Actually, circularity can help with efficiency, and efficiency can help with, and hopefully with reduction in costs. So again, as we continue to understand what circularity is, the one word we didn't hear at the beginning of the session was the word efficiency. So I think that does play an important role in advancing and providing a compelling reason why circularity is absolutely essential and something that we need to be focusing more and more on. But did anybody want to sort of come back to maybe John's comment or anything I've said?
Yeah, I do. I have an idea to put forth. One is that there is a client who is ready to make the extra cost be part of the pleasure of the purchase, but it's a small part, I would say. To bring in what Rebecca said about the transfer of wealth, I think that it's going to help with all of the United States for not the last 80 years, but until 2000, imported 80% of the world's jewelry and diamond production. That's changed with China and India. There's so much jewelry here that we can now look at United States as a source in the supply chain. And that is what you guys are brilliantly addressing. Good for you. I think that's right on target. And that will keep the cost down because it's already here. You're not paying miners. There's no cost of refining. There's very little cost attributed except for things from maisons for the manufacturing and the labor. And I wonder, the question I have is it more ethical, and I think it feels more ethical to buy something that's recycled or something that was newly mined, but it's still using a raw material for adornment. And I can't answer that, but I think it's an easier sell to the people like your children who want to know what we've done for our planet to say, well, this is not being extracted recently.
I feel obliged, wearing my World Gold Council hat, I feel obliged to counter that in the sense there's an assumption there that the mining activity is a net negative for the planet.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not saying it hasn't been in the past, and certainly it does dig holes in the ground to extract stuff. There's going to be more mining on the planet, not less.
Oh.
Simply, it's the way the
Agreed.
the world needs it.
Yeah.
So the question is, can we move to that mining activity? Are we moving now to that mining activity potentially being a net positive? Now, for many, it's a difficult one to believe, but there are already many examples of industrial mines that have restoration programs and protection programs that actually are looking to move towards net positivity in terms of nature, biodiversity, water quality. It's a transition, but I think we should be careful of the assumption that just by buying something that pre-exists is a net positive. Because the trouble with that level of circularity is unless you're doing something else, you're not making any change at all.
Right. Yeah.
And I think what this highlights is the need for better awareness, better education to understand these points. I mean, just to counter that in terms of if we are seeing mining more positively, then actually, if I was to use the term recycled, we're not discussing the risks with recycled. So one of the biggest risks with recycled is you don't actually know the ultimate source, potentially. So
I honestly, again,
Yeah.
I don't think with eventually we're talking about gold, and it is gold because with gemstones it's different very much, and with jewelry pieces it's different because the provenance is kind of key to the value potentially of the product. But with gold, eventually, the point is, even if you did know, what is the identity giving you? What is the value of that identity? It's not the challenge is not the gold in the system going circular forever, and all gold is basically circular, because there is no waste in gold. Gold is very rarely wasted. It is, what is the value of retaining the identity? And let's pretend we're in an ideal world, and we can move it not from gold but to plastic. If we're in a completely circular world, and all of the actors, and this is the key part, in that supply chain are responsible actors, then knowing where the plastic came from isn't really important. The thing I think that is often confused is that you're confusing the identity of source with the identity of irresponsible actors. And I often say it's not the metal that is irresponsible, it's the people. And I think it's worth bearing in mind, because we otherwise start to talk about, somebody said to me, well, how can I guarantee this gold wasn't something? And the truth is, at that point, as a gold object, you couldn't. But what were you seeking to identify it for anyway? And I think that purpose, that the purpose of what is the origin or the source is really important, because we talk about traceability and transparency, but it has to be for a purpose. And I think it's just, that's, so I'm just, sorry, just jumping in there.
No. And I think this is really helpful, because actually I was going to move on to Kat. I've noticed you've been patiently sitting there quietly. And actually it's the point that John is making in terms of, are we talking about gold, are we talking about gems? So, you've got different kind of claims out there. There's component claims in terms of the actual material components, and then there's the final piece claims. What is the difference, and how are you seeing this enabled to whether certify, verify, and draw some of these issues out that John just highlighted?
It's a very interesting question, because I do think that a lot of claims are not clear if it is between a component or a part of the piece, or if it is a completed piece. And I want to use an example from a different industry. Like if you're out buying a cotton t-shirt and there is a tag hanging to purchase it, but there's 100% organic cotton. And you think, great, that piece is made with 100% organic cotton. But if you go look at the back and the materials and what's actually included, maybe there's only 50% cotton in that item, but that 50% is 100% organic. So is that label confusing and misleading as to what you thought you were purchasing? It's not a clear claim. And so in the jewelry industry, we need to be more specific. We need to be more, and that's what we see in the world of auditing, right? If you're making claims, we need to verify those claims. What is the claim you're making, and what is the scope of that claim? What is the materials? It is a material claim, it is a full product claim. And then what goes into that claim, and how are you giving that information to the consumer? And that's very important, because I think there's a lot of overgeneralization that goes into the making us feel good about our purchase, right? Where, actually we work with Frederick on their circular diamond program. The diamonds in this piece are circular, and we know they are because we outlined all the criteria, and then we audited it, and then we make sure that we're meeting all of that criteria. So it depends on the phrasing and making sure that you're being completely transparent as possible to the customer, and that you understand the scope of what's included.
Great. Any comments from the panel on the last bit of this conversation before I open it up to the audience? Audience? I feel like the silence in relation to the football isn't good, but we'll carry on. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, already?
Question back there.
Well, two issues. One is, with the rise in the price of gold in the last few years, and everyone's been selling their gold, what happens to all of that gold? Where does it go? Who recycles it? I know some pieces are pulled out for sale, but there's this, I don't know how much it is compared to
can speak to the latter. It is, and we had a great conversation about that, and I thank you for sharing. Even Jade, who was on the panel, our diamond resilience in the diamond industry panel yesterday, she does a lot of reworks. So a lot of our designers, whether well-known or by appointment only, are doing a lot of custom, what we would consider custom work and reworks to redesign pieces. And it does seem the best, if a piece cannot be or will not be worn as it is, and you can bring a new life to it, and you're at least, there's some type of circularity to that, right? Because you're reusing some of the stones in most cases, then that is increasing, and many more designers are doing it. And it is when it can speak to the U.S. specifically, because I only serve North America, but it is happening all across the states.
The annual average for recycled scrap, which is largely jewelry, is about 25% of annual
25%, yeah. Wow.
So about a quarter of all annual supply of gold coming back onto the market is recycled jewelry. Recycled gold. The vast majority of that is scrap jewelry. So it actually, you mentioned the price. We expected it's the one elastic part of supply. It takes a long time to turn mines to be productive, but the one elastic price responsive part of supply is recycled gold. Actually, when we saw the price rise and rise and rise and rise, we expected recycled to actually grow at a similar level, and it didn't. And that's because I think people increasingly are starting to hold on to their gold because they recognize, as you say, you recognize its value, its innate value. Previously, it was the piece that they would hold on to. Now it's actually, to some extent, the gold content, it seems, as value in itself.
So, John, that's kept a constant then? That percentage of recycled as a part of the whole is relatively constant?
It's
Fascinating.
It's basically in the nature of the gold market, without going on to market dynamics, is a remarkably balanced. The reason why gold it may rise, but is not as volatile as most commodities and metals, is that recycled component. Price goes high, you get some scrap. And the price goes down, people stop selling. So yeah.
So 2 questions back there. Oh.
So I'm saying that an annual supply, the gold coming onto the market, annual supply, whatever it was, it's most post-consumer. It's nearly all it's mostly post-consumer because it's mostly jewelry still.
Question?
There's been a lot of talk on post-consumer,
Yep.
but there is consumer. And my question is, what do you think is more important to focus on? Increasing the consumer demand for recycled materials and sustainable materials, or getting the retailers out there to increase their demand of their manufacturers and supply partners to provide recycled materials and sustainable materials? I guess it's a kind of what came first, the chicken or the egg conversation.
Is that me?
I mean, anybody can take this? I might have to pick on John then.
Again, I'm going to challenge slightly the terms, sorry, but the newly mined gold should be sustainable gold. So you should be asking for that to be responsible because that has sustainability impacts in and of itself. As I say, the way that the gold market functions is actually, for the majority of the world, the gold is mixed. It comes in from various sources, refined, scrap, some newly mined, and it would be melted down and then sold to the consumer as in basically gold is gold is gold. That's for a lot of the world, unless you choose to be segmented. I think the question you might be asking is, should the segmentation market grow? Should people start to be saying, I want gold of a certain type? And you can go to a refiner, you can go to a London good delivery refiner, Sakila knows this well, and you can now ask for, I want gold from e-waste only. And they'll give it to you. They'll give it to you at a price because they have to segment it, and it's inefficient to do so. So should we encourage that? I honestly don't know, because I don't know what the benefit brings. I don't know. What I would say is we should encourage clarity and transparency of the categories of segmentation. So, for instance, we encourage e-waste. If it wasn't for gold in e-waste recycling wouldn't exist. Now they recover 10, 20 metals from that. But it's the value of gold in the recycling that, for instance, allows e-waste to have become economically viable, recycling of e-waste. Should we encourage consumers to ask? I personally don't have an opinion on that. If you think that would grow the recycling of e-waste, then possibly. But it is less efficient. It does impose a cost. So a lot of luxury brands, some of them are willing to pay the premium. I can say the vast majority of the market and the way that gold is traded, that doesn't occur.
Any more questions? I'm going to pick on Lisa. I know Lisa. Oh,
There's one in the back.
Sorry, that was not a finger, by the way. Do it that way.
I am.
I can't speak to whether or not what I'm wearing is recycled, but it is secondary market. I buy a majority of my jewelry now on the secondary market. So that's from antique dealers or other platforms, like sales platforms. That's where I'm buying most of my jewelry, personally.
Well, I've got Frederick who confirmed that my ring is ethically sourced, so thank you, Frederick.
I was going to say my gold chain is also secondary market.
No, but there was a question before, just I was thinking about, is it a niche to transform the ancient grandmother's brooch that is a little bit obsolete and everything? Yeah, I think it's a niche, but it's a beautiful niche, and it creates a desire for sure. This is one of the signature of Rovna. We've created a design that can welcome different stones between 2 and 6 carats, so that people can come with the antique brooch. We're going to repolish the stone, we're going to recertify it and give it a new life and electrify these beautiful stones from the 100 years in a new creation. But we will not do a special order, we will do a semi-special order. It would be on the signature of Rovna, but with your stone, and that creates lots of desire and love.
So I guess how many people in the room have jewelry, watch, or something that's been passed down from grandparents?
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone. Well, most. Yeah. Lisa, I know circularity has been quite close to you, and we've discussed it in the past, but the subject of circularity has been quite a close topic for you. Is there anything you would like to add, or any remarks?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Okay, well then I think we've done a good job. Self-congratulatory.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Pleasure.